So, who is the Indian worker? It sounds like a pretty straightforward question, right? But the answer, well, it paints this incredibly complex and honestly a fascinating picture of a nation on the move. So let's unpack it together. Let's get into the numbers, the history, and the real human stories that define what it means to work in India today. But, before we dive deep, let's start with an even bigger question. Why do any of us work? I mean, yeah, obviously we work to earn a living, to pay the bills. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? Work gives us a sense of self-worth, a purpose. It's how we contribute, how we become part of the larger national story. And in the world of economics, that contribution has a name: economic activity. Basically, if you're doing anything that adds to the country's gross national product, you're officially a worker. And that simple idea, that definition, is the foundation for absolutely everything we're about to explore.
Okay, so keeping that definition in mind, let's start building a real picture of the Indian workforce. And I think the very first thing you need to wrap your head around is just the incredible scale of it all.
As of 2022-23, India's workforce stood at 545 million people. Now, just pause on that for a second. That is not just a statistic. That's a massive engine of human potential, a number that's bigger than the entire population of many, many countries combined. So where do all these people live and work? Well, the divide is pretty stark. A whopping 2/3 of the entire workforce is rural. This is absolutely fundamental. If you don't get this, you can't really understand the nature of work in India. And what about gender? Again, we see a really significant gap. About 77% of the workforce is male, and only 23% is female. This tells us right away there's a much bigger story here about who's participating and what kind of opportunities are available. We'll get into that. Right. So now that we have a sense of the sheer size of it, we can start to break it down a bit more. When you look at how people work in India, it really boils down to three main categories. First up, you've got the self-employed. Think about a local cement shop owner. They own their business, they run the show. Then you have casual wage laborers. This might be a construction worker, for example, hired for a specific job and paid for the work they do that day or that week. And finally, there are regular salaried employees. This would be like a civil engineer working for that same construction company, someone who gets a steady, predictable paycheck. So how does this actually break down for men? Well, for them, self-employment is king. It makes up a huge 62% of the male workforce. The rest is pretty much split between those regular salaried jobs and casual labor. But the picture for women looks quite different. Yes, self-employment is still the biggest piece of the pie, but look at the role of casual labor. It's a much bigger slice for women compared to men, which kind of hints that for many women, work is a lot more precarious, a lot less stable. And that rural-urban divide we talked about, it's just as dramatic here. Out in rural India, self-employment, which is often tied to farming, totally dominates at 61%. But then you shift your focus to the cities and boom, regular salaried jobs become the single biggest category at 47%. It's really a tale of two completely different economic worlds. This whole split between rural and urban work is actually part of a much bigger story, a huge historical shift that's been reshaping India for decades. So let's take a look at that journey, from the farm to the factory, and then to what came next. This table right here tells such a powerful story. Just look at this. In 1972, nearly 3/4 of the entire workforce was in agriculture. Fast forward 50 years, and that number has dropped to less than half. So, where did all those people go? Well, they moved into industry, and even more of them moved into the services sector. This is the classic textbook path of economic development playing out on a massive scale. But, and this is a really big but, this transition came with a major, major challenge. The economy, the GDP, it was growing fast. The country was producing more, but the number of jobs just wasn't keeping up. This problem got a name: jobless growth. Making more stuff, providing more services, but without creating enough new jobs for a huge and growing population. And what's wild is, this isn't some new modern problem. Decades and decades ago, Mahatma Gandhi warned about this exact thing. He called it a craze for labor-saving machinery that could leave thousands of people behind. It's a powerful reminder that this tension has been around for a very long time. So all of this, it brings us to the most critical part of our story. The part that really defines the day-to-day reality for the vast, vast majority of Indian workers. We're talking about the informal economy. So it really boils down to two completely different sides of the workforce. On one side, you have the formal, or organized sector. This means security, regular pay, social security benefits, legal protection. But on the other side, you have the informal sector, and it's the exact opposite. Irregular income, no safety net, and zero government protection.
So what's the actual split? How many people are on each side? Okay, I want you to take a moment and really let this number sink in. 94%. More than 9 out of every 10 workers in India operate in the informal sector. This one single statistic, it changes everything about how you have to think about the Indian economy.
And this is not just an abstract number. To make it real, let's look at the story of Ahmedabad. Back in the 1980s, you had over 130,000 workers with secure, formal jobs in textile mills. Then the mills closed. And just like that, an entire middle class was pushed out of security and into the precarious world of the informal sector. They were thrown into poverty. That is what informalization looks like on a human scale. And this image here, this is that reality. For millions upon millions, work is day to day. There's no guarantee of a pension, no health benefits, sometimes not even a guarantee you'll have a paycheck next week. This is the life for the huge majority of people who are out there building the nation, literally brick by brick.
Which leaves us with this final massive question. As India's economy continues to grow, as it continues to modernize, the core challenge is still right there in front of us. How do you build an economy that offers not just growth on paper, but real security and dignity for the 545 million people who power it every single day?